Welcome to Powered by Nyame. I'm your guide and host, Gracie Kunadu. On this episode, our focus will be on your second childhood. Many of you are familiar with the phrase, once a man, twice a child, man being human. Now, I'm going to share with you a perspective that will take us further than that phraseology usually means or connotes. And I'm going to start with a story of a good friend of mine that I had a conversation with a few days ago. And my point is not to put him on the spot, so I'll leave him nameless. The point is that that conversation I had with him has a lot of import, a lot of importance for all of you that are watching this video and more. And then I'll share with you afterwards the broader importance and meaning, from that conversation for us to really get a handle on what it means to have a second and some of us a third childhood. So here's the conversation. So a good friend and I was talking a few days ago, and during this sit-down chat, he shared with me, some of the feelings that he had toward friends and friendship. And at this point in his life, he didn't need friendship or desired friendship. It is what it is sort of mentality. And I listened and I understood exactly where it's coming from, because I too don't like any crowd around me. I may have one or two, maybe three friends or people that are close to me. And if you're that close, then you're not friends anymore, you're family. So in truth, I really don't have friends. Either you're family or you're not. That said, and more so on him than me, we're chatting. And as I'm listening to him, what I hear, which is what he doesn't really say through his mouth, but what I hear is this. I hear that friendships are important to him. Not the him as in the adult him that's speaking to me as I'm talking to you. It is the child in him that for one reason or another, one circumstance or another, whether it's family dynamics, whether it is sibling dynamic, or whether it's the community dynamic, that is the place or neighborhoods in which we all grew up like he did. Whatever the reasons may have been, the factors may have been at play, his childhood self was not serviced, was not given the nutrients he needed as a child to grow into the adult that he is now. In other words, the childhood version of him wanted to have friends. And as I explained to him, human beings, whether children or not, are social beings. We want to be part of a community. And that's why there are gangs. That's why there are mafias. That's why there are cliques. That's why there are sporting teams. That's why there are professional guilds. Because we want to be part of some grouping, right? Often called family. And in many ways, we try to make them feel like family. So I played basketball in high school and a little bit in college. And so each team that I was on was like a family, right? The same is true if we speak to anyone that's been part of a street gang, has been part of a clique or a crew or an organization or association, is that it tends to have the claim or the offering or the vibe of a family, because we want to be part of something that is just more than us. And so because we have this natural drive and urge from childhood onward to be part of something, it means that the vehicle for that is usually, for children especially, friendships, right? That is, people who are not related to us by blood, birth, or adoption. And so not having those desires met as a child led to certain decisions in his young adult life that put him on the path, essentially away from his destiny, because his destiny was activated, right, in childhood. However, that child has been arrested because it didn't get what it needed. And so what I said to him is that indeed you do want friendships and do you care about it, right? But you have to, meaning him, have to come to terms and resolve that matter of friendships with your childhood self. And then I told him how to do that. I said, you have to have a conversation, sit down with your childhood self. Now, I'm going to step back for a moment for those of you wondering, well, how do you do that? And what do you mean by the childhood version? I mean this. I mean that each of us have a version of us that has lived a part of our lives in the adult stage. And that part of our life is archived, right? It's archived back home. That is in the village or in the spiritual realm of things, right? However, that part of us that's archived, it is archived there, and it needs to be there only if we haven't trapped it in our heart and our soul. And so he had trapped the childhood version of himself, keeping it from going home, from being archived properly, so that the younger version, right, of him that should be archived, right, back home, but has been trapped inside of him because of not feeding and coming to terms and being one with it, that ill resolve is then baked into the young adult and older adult person that he is now, right? And I can relate to it, and many of us can relate to this. And so it is the ill-resolvedness between our childhood self and the self now. But there's more to this. We also have an older version of ourselves. So let's say we're in our 40s, right? There's a version of us in human years is in the 60s in the other side, right? That's waiting on it. That's the evolved one, right? Now, it's not guaranteed we'll get to that evolved one, but it's there because it's more like a relay race. Is that one, the younger version of ourselves has to go through what it has to go through, has to come to some resolve, some peace with it, that to grow into the mature person that we are. And yes, it is raining behind me, which is wonderful. It's a blessing for you all and for me. And so the younger version has to come to terms with the now present, the present self, right? And in doing so, you go into the older one that's archived and waiting for you. So when you get back home, one, right? In other words, what's on here has to be also what's there. And so I told him I had a similar story. Some of you might remember from my previous episode that I spoke about a child incident, a traumatic one that happened, a fire that happened that affected myself, my brother, my mother, and a younger sister of mine, right? Well, guess what? I had trapped the younger self, from that moment onward, right? I didn't release him. I didn't come to terms with him. I never cried for him. I did not let out my feelings of anxiety, pain, and loss in that moment. I held him here with the bars made of anxiety, pain, and other things that I'm feeling, right? So those are the bars that I imprisoned him in. And as this rain is pouring on me, it's showing that the healing process that I've gone through and that I hope my friend goes through and I hope you go through, this is the evidence of it, right? It's pouring rain here now all of a sudden, precisely because this is a sign of cleansing, of renewal, of blessing. And so that blessing, in fact, allowed me, through a conversation with my younger self, where I literally sat down in the parking lot in the car and looked at my other self, right? And whether you see your other self now is not important. You call your younger self and you have and you explain to them why you were angry, why you felt lost, why you felt the way you felt about friendships, why you made decisions that you made that affected him and affected the you in the now, right? Which will affect the older version of you if you get there and become one with it, right? And in doing so, I felt sort of a burden lifted off of me. And that burden lifted off me is that I could open the doors to the prison that I had made for him, similar that my friend had made for himself through this lie about not wanting friendships, and then allow him, the younger version of me, to go home, right? Now, once he's home, that part of the story is what is resolved and complete, which means this part of the story now can then proceed to my older version of myself and grow into who I really am. So, having a second childhood is not simply having a childhood that we had or the child that we were in the adult form, essentially let them out and play. That's cool, but that's not what I mean. Second child, I mean, is that resolve you get from your childhood that's now in the adult you, that child and you have to be one, right? Where it's not simply letting them come out now and then, right? It's not simply you're holding your younger self as a captive that you free now and then put him back or her back into prison. That's not what I mean. But we do that. What I'm referring to once more is that the younger version of you and over come to terms, come to peace and resolve. So whatever the childhood traumas that led to the decisions that were made from that point on in your life that shaped who you have grown into or you think you have become into, that has to be explained, that has to be let out, that has to be poured out, right? In a safe place for you to bleed with your childhood self, even with your younger self. Let's say you're, again, in your proverbial 40s, that 19-year-old, 20-year-old person where you made some critical decisions about who you will become or who you have become, that has to come to terms as well. Because that version is also there, needs to be archived. Essentially, all the years that have lived are written down on a book of sorts. It's an analogy. And in that book, everything you have done and said or thought have been written down, recorded. Once it's been written, that's written, it's done. However, that writing is often incomplete. That writing can be edited. That writing can be corrected if we have not come to terms with the written self in our early childhood years, and especially in the late teenage, young adult years that have led into the older adult, if you are 40 and above, that you are now. And so the second childhood is essentially the adult body, right? That's at one, that is a line that is simply folded into, right, the present person now. Because that child never really goes away and shouldn't go away. It is archived, but that archive is what? The blending of one. So on the world of spirit and the world of mortality, those two are one. There is no tension, there's no friction, there's no unexplained, there's no ill resolve. It's simply what? At one. Come to terms, understanding. And in doing so, now the present you, right, can now had the next challenge of going into the older you that's already there, already archived, right? That's who you're going to become. It's already there. It's already been written. You have to then, of course, keep working on being resolved with those selves. And in doing so, and here's the catch, you know you are resolved because A, you will either have or get people around you that will poke at and that will support your healing. If you're a man and you're married to, or you have a significant partner in a woman that's concerned about your things and about status and about more things, and is not concerned about your healing. But if you have someone, whether male or female, that's in your life that is concerned about your healing, concerned about your health, that's concerned about what you're going through, right? Then that's the ones and the kinds of people that will simply come around you. And that will be evidence that you are on the right path to actualizing and being one with not only the potential spiritual self that's waiting for you, but with the present self that has to move through its stages to get to that point. And as I've said before in previous episodes, you see, this life is rather simple. And the second childhood is also simple, but I want you to get what the second childhood is. It is the ongoing resolve of the childhood self that then is one and morphed into the adult self. And that oneness has to keep keep itself always active, right? So you will still behave and view the world through, right, the fearlessness that children have, through the active sense of of forgiveness that children have. Children can be angry with you, next minute they're back to being besties, right? We lose that when we become adults. We become very cold and callous and hard. And that hardness, that rigidness, right, is the lack of the second childhood. That inability to be flexible, inability to even conversate or even communicate, I should say, with yourself, with the people around you, right? Rather than shut them off and shut down. Those are all evidences of lack of second childhood. The opposite is true. So as this rain pours, and I'm about to head back inside, I've been your guide and host, episode of Powered by Nyame. Please drop your questions in the comments and experiences down below. Until next time, stay well, stay dry.